Mike, I think we got to be honest with the audience here. We actually recorded this very episode one time already. And unfortunately, we had to re record it because of the timing aspect of it.
Mm,
We're going to talk about Selena and the documentary that is out on Netflix right now. The reason we had to re record it is because before we were going to put this out, her father was still alive. And then over the time frame, he has since passed away. So we decided that we're going to re-record this episode and not refer to him as if he is in the present tense.
right.
And
It was like less than a week later, I
it
think.
was, yeah, it was very close to, and the reason why we want to do this episode, or this is 50 for 50, but we thought it would kind of be cool to make some of this stuff pretty timely, because in 50 for 50 we're talking about the history of records, that albums that affected us. This documentary is dropped just not that long ago, and so we want to have a side sort of podcast related to 50 for 50. So we are calling this the Cool Check-In. Shout out to Ad Rock. um and the before we had actually, when we recorded the first one, we didn't even have a name for the whole thing.
We
So
did not.
since then, we created the name for this. So the Cool Check-In is just going to be like every once and again, Mike and I are going to talk about something that is more recent, something that's a little bit more timely, and some of that will be the things that happen in music, some documentaries that come out. There are going to be movies about music that we may check in on, and so that's what this is going to be. And when I told you, I said, "Hey, there's this new documentary on Selena. It might be kind of fun to talk about, because we are not going to do a Selena album on 50 for 50. So it's also, these episodes are also kind of fun for us to just go, we're not going to talk about this person more than likely, so let's talk about them in a shorter version, and these will be shorter as well. Our 50 for 50 episodes are hour plus. These will probably be half that or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I'm actually curious, from a cultural perspective, like what Selena meant to you.
she didn't really mean anything to me, honestly,
Okay.
until I really learned her story. The Tejano music is not something that I necessarily latched onto as I was growing up. I remember there was a Spanish language album that my dad used to listen to by Linda Ronstadt, of
Mm,
all people. Um, and so it wasn't like there wasn't any Spanish or Mexican music um in my home, because there was, but it was
and to be fair, Linda Ronstadt is part Mexican.
yes.
So, yes, it's not like a culture vulture kind of thing. She was acknowledging and honoring her heritage.
Yes. And so that album, I'm actually trying to remember,
It's probably like
Canciones de
Canciones
mi
de mhm,
Padre. Yeah,
mhm.
de mi Padre. And so that album was on a lot in my household, but it's not like my dad was solely listening to Spanish music. My dad is born in the United States. He didn't even speak Spanish himself. So that culture, the music and stuff did not really it didn't really exist that much to me, though. When hip hop started to incorporate a lot of like the street slangy Spanish, like I always thought that was cool, because it was like, oh, like this different culture can actually exist in this in hip hop,
I
very.
mean, Latino culture, hip hop was started in the Bronx by, I mean, not just black people and certainly not just black American people, but people from the Caribbean,
Yep.
which is certainly inclusive of Latino culture. Um, I mean, the Bronx, particularly South Bronx, is very much Puerto Rican and Dominican neighborhoods, even to this day. So, the Latin community is very, very important to hip hop culture, from the very, very beginning of it.
When was the first time you remember hearing Spanish in hip hop, or like Spanish words or lines, or
I mean,
something that wasn't just kind of like one word?
so to be fair, to like start from the beginning, I was raised by my maternal grandparents who were both born in San Pedro de Macorís, which is in DR. So Spanish was actually one of several languages that was spoken in the household growing up.
Mhm.
Um, and while most of the music that we listened to, or that I listened to as a kid, was, American English music, um, my grandmother in particular would listen to like salsa and merengue, and we
Mhm.
had, Celia Cruz records in the house,
Oh,
and
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So, I think New York City also is just such a very like Latin dominant culture. Even if you are not of any sort of Latin descent, like you still have kind of everybody who's raised in New York can speak a little bit of Spanglish, right?
Mhm.
Um, so in terms of hip hop, I mean, there were definitely from like the breakdancing days. Like I remember seeing like all those early breakdancing movies, and there were people of Hispanic descent
Mhm.
in those movies. In terms of hip hop, probably the first person I heard utilize Spanish in hip hop was actually like from the West Coast, would have been like Mellow Man Ace
Right.
with
That's what I was thinking of.
Mentirosa. Yeah.
That's the
Um,
exact song that I was thinking of. And I wouldn't say that that song was necessarily, or is well remembered or well respected. It was a little bit of like
it's a little corny.
a little bit of a joke, the hook and everything was very catchy,
Right.
and so it's very memorable. But, thinking about like, La Raza, like, "This is for La
Kid
Raza,"
Frost. Yeah.
that's memorable as well. But yeah, it didn't like it wasn't something that, I always wondered when I was growing up, like, and we'll talk about this in a future episode because we talk about the Fugees and how Wyclef started to use a lot of different cultural music in his songs, which made the Carnival so much of a fun record.
Right.
But yeah, like, I'm trying to think of like moments where Latin artists were kind of like, this is here, like even somebody like Ricky Martin or something, right? Like
Yeah. I mean,
it was still there was still a little bit of a gimmick to it,
yeah. I
in
mean,
some way.
when we were kids, there was like Menudo in New York, particularly was, and I would imagine in all other communities that had a
Mhm.
healthy Latin population,
They were on Silver
Menudo
Spoons,
was
man, of course we knew.
huge, and then after Menudo came Lisa,
Uh-huh.
who's from New York, and Gloria Estefan, and then things kind of built from there. Um, and Lisa was not directly hip hop, but she was hip hop adjacent,
Yeah.
because they were making, she was making music with Full Force. Full Force was also hip hop adjacent. So again, like the cultures were intermingling from day one.
Yeah, to bring it back to Selena, obviously when her murder happened, that was a giant story. And
Hmm.
if you didn't know who Selena was, you were very quickly to find out who she was because right before she passes or she gets murdered, she's recording her English crossover album. And
Right.
so those songs start to play after she passes away. And that, to think about like, and this is kind of why we're doing this episode, is a lot of what we have talked about on 50 for 50 so far, and some stuff that people haven't heard yet, but stuff that Mike and I have recorded. Some of the themes are like this young greatness, and in some instances the music that was created that we are fans of is created at such a young age of the artist, and then we don't, so in some cases we don't get to see what happens to them as they grow older,
Right.
or the first album is really the only thing that matters in their catalog. So Selena's also someone very young. She's like 5 years older than us. Like she was born in 71, I believe.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, to think you never think of Selena as growing older. You only think of her as, however old she was
I
right
think she
before
was
she passed,
23. Yeah.
24. Yeah, 23, 24.
Yeah.
She will forever be 23, 24 to us because that's how we saw her. So I just think that whole idea of art and everything, and who she is and who she never got to be, it's just something. It's just a story that we're gonna tell a lot about over these episodes.
Hmm.
So the thing that I wanted to talk to you about when it comes to this documentary is it almost always feels like these young groups that are created, like there is a blueprint to this, and it is the Jackson Five. And Selena and her family was no different. And they tell that story in this documentary. What we know about how hard the Jackson kids' life was, like, it's almost like, do we really want that to be the blueprint? Like, it's the blueprint for success 100%, but also that's a rough life, man.
And for every Jackson family that ended up getting super successful, there's 100 families that were not as successful. I mean, we're looking at the Jacksons, but was there another family as successful as the Jacksons? No.
And so the Latino version of the Jackson Five is kind of how the group was created. And
Right.
the group, Selena y Los Dinos, is based off of her father Abraham's band when he was younger, was Los Dinos. So he just kept that band and the idea of that band with the young kids. The idea that they're a little bit too Mexican for Americans, and yet they're a little bit too
Too
American
American
for
for
the Mexican
Mexicans.
audience. That
Yeah.
is something that I know a lot of people who are like me, who did not grow up in Mexico and grew up in the United States and did not learn the language. Like, I am a biracial person, so I just kind of try and fit in wherever I go. But in very, very strict Mexican cultures, I don't fit really at all.
Right.
And that is a struggle of growing up in different cultures and such. Is just that idea of like, where do I land? And if even, I have a really good friend. He still has, because he grew up in LA, and he grew up with Spanish speaking parents, so he still even has an accent to this day. This man is 40 years old. But the cool thing about it is not something he ever tried to get rid of, right? Like, that is just who he is, and he is
Right.
proud of that. If he goes to if he goes to speak at a conference and he has that accent, somebody in that audience is probably gonna create some sort of, they're kind of gonna have a conclusion about who he is just based on that. But at the same time, that is who he is. So I always find that aspect pretty fascinating. Like, how do we all fit in? Who are we to everybody? We can't please everybody. So how do we all just fit in, in the identity of what America is supposed to be?
And that's the thing. I mean, obviously I'm black, but I'm a first generation American. Both of my parents were immigrants. Um, my family's from the Caribbean. So if you're looking at Black American history, like there's a definite disconnect there. And even from the perspective of like the community I grew up in, which was it was black, but very like Caribbean centric. There's a sense that once you're Americanized, you're not really a part of that community either. So it's really just kind of figuring out your individuality and getting in where you fit in, and not really trying to not concern yourself too much with where other people want you to fit. And I mean, I've this is a lesson that I've had to teach myself and learn over and over again, not
Hmm.
only in terms of like my ethnicity and my race, but also my sexuality. It's like, you know, you're you before you are anything else. And you need to figure out, where your comfort zone is, and don't let other people dictate to you where you should be.
And how hard is that?
It's pretty hard.
Pretty
It's
hard.
hard because, people are going to pull you, I don't know if this is specifically an American thing, but there's just this desire to be part of something, be part of a community. And the easiest way for people to find a community is like people that look like you, act like you, talk like you, whatever it is. And like there's a saying, your skin folk ain't always your kinfolk.
Hmm.
And the reality is, like, you're going to connect with different people in different ways, and you know basing who you connect with specifically on like a genetic marker, I don't think necessarily makes the most sense, because they're not going to have something in common with you just because of that.
Yeah, when you get older, like, and this is part of the reason we're doing a big reason we're doing this is because we've got 49 coming up on 50 years behind us, and you would think that when you're a little kid, you go, oh wow, like when you get older, you gain all this wisdom, and you do gain a lot of wisdom, but it's not always easy to apply. And it is often, you can say it and you can tell other people, oh, this is how I see it and this is how I try and do it, and it is hard to actually follow through in what you say because of insecurities or fears or whatever. And so just the idea that we as guys turning 50 later this year, I think it's very honest, and um it's probably helps people when you kind of tell them, like, yeah, I don't have everything figured out. I'm never going to have everything figured out, and we are a work in progress until the day that we die. And so that is something that, coming to grips with that as someone who's turning 50, you're just like, oh, by 50 I'll have it all. Like, you have to have it all figured out, right? No way.
No
Like,
way.
there's no way.
No way. It's one of those things. It's like when you get asked, what do you wish you had known at a much younger age that you know now? And that is one of the main things, is that you're never going to have it all figured out.
Mhm.
Like, life is a continual process of learning. When I was a kid, I looked at my elders, my parents, my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, and I was like, oh, it feels like they know everything because they're
Mhm.
telling you how to live your life. And when you get older and you look at it from that perspective, it's like, oh, they didn't know a damn thing. Like, they were making it up as they went
They were
along as
just
well.
moving. Yeah,
Yeah,
they were moving. And
yeah,
sometimes it's all you can do, right? Like, we have a lot of things that we want to do. We have morals, we have foundations, we have blueprints of how we follow. And sometimes you just have to move. You can't sit there and always analyze and think, and sometimes you just have to go
just
and
got to
and
go.
and and do, hope that you're doing the right thing, or that you in that moment. So and then if you're not and then if you don't do the right thing, then you have all these regrets and you have all these weird feelings. You're like, oh my gosh. And all of a sudden, something that happened 15 years ago just is in your brain for some reason. I'm like, what? Why am I even thinking about this? So yeah, it's
Yeah,
very interesting. So to circle this back to Selena, and this is why we do this, right? We're gonna go off on tangents because uh, music is something that we utilize in a way to not only for entertainment, but also to kind of like think about stuff and to learn about things and what was this person going through. The the idea I had, and I shared this with you in our episode that has now been deleted, so I'm not going to surprise you with this one. But as I was watching the documentary, I'm watching Selena as a very young person kind of figure out that she can use her popularity as a brand of sorts. She is working on fashion. She has her own boutique, and this is unfortunately where her untimely passing is at the crossroads, because the woman who murders her is the person who runs her fan club, and then she gets close to her, and then she hires her to help her run this boutique. But the idea that Selena, in a very early, we're talking mid 90s, she was like, oh, I can use this popularity and this relationship that I have with this audience, and then I can create something, not music, that is something else, and I can share it with them, and maybe that is part of my career. And I was like, what if Selena was like Taylor before Taylor? Like, that idea was out there for me. Could she have actually created that blueprint for what Taylor Swift does today. Now, Taylor Swift does it to an extreme, but
Right.
Beyonce, Mariah
But
Carey, they have the same relationship with their fans. But Selena was doing it like in the mid '90s, and she hadn't even crossed over to the U.S. yet.
right. She was Her branding sense was definitely way ahead of its time. I mean, realistically speaking, the amount of money that you're going to make off of records is fairly limited. And maybe she realized that and was like, I want to branch out into other things. Maybe she just had like this creativity gene and she was like, I want to branch out into other things. Whatever it was, she saw the future. And at that time, early 90s, there weren't really a lot of musical artists, even in hip hop. And we like to view hip hop as kind of like the forefather of all the branding stuff, from Rockefeller to, so on, so on. But she was even a little bit ahead of the curve there in terms of figuring out like alternate ways of branding and, generating income beyond just making music and going on tour. Because even, she said in the documentary, she was like, I don't know if I necessarily want to like go on tour and make music forever.
And as we know, there are going to be more folks whose careers, maybe they have a little bit of success, but to have that everlasting success is a far and few between.
Right.
Think of an artist who you love, and there's 100 other artists who that you like a song of, who never really made another song that you like as much.
Right.
And
Right.
so for her to look at it that way and go, and again, this is another theme that we keep talking about as we do these shows, which is this young brilliance, the idea of understanding the business savviness of that at that moment, at the young age, going like, music may not be forever. Like, I'm hot right now, I'm popping, but maybe down the line it's a little harder as I get older. How do I grow with my audience? But here's something that I can do right now that I also enjoy, that maybe I don't have to be as popular as I am today to do it. And you made me think of something, and I never thought I would mention uh MC Hammer on a Selena episode, but I was trying to think of like who was the first rapper that I thought really attempted to commercialize his persona. And I think Hammer tried really hard to do that. The problem was, he kind of, again, we go back to just sort of where do you fit? Hammer was in the middle of, like, hip hop didn't really accept him. And then the music world still saw him as rap music, and it
Right.
wasn't really accepted. So he's kind of in the middle, and he's trying to utilize his insane popularity to create an after career for himself. And I don't know what Hammer is doing today, but I don't imagine he's anywhere near as successful as he thought he was going to be, based on, all the people who he had to pay for and who he had to support and all that stuff. Like, if you think in 1991, you're like, oh man, MC Hammer's going to be in my life for the next 20 years. And he was pretty much gone in 5
Gone.
years.
Yeah, less. But you're right. Hammer, from a branding perspective, Hammer was one of, if not the first rap artist to really just kind of like, he was getting mainstream endorsement deals. He had his record label. He was doing like all this different stuff. And I think, mm, maybe he mistimed when that bubble was going to bust. But also, like you said, hip hop was not really conducive to that kind of thing at the moment. There was still like a purity aspect to hip hop. And, Hammer came out the gate already with like a side eye, because he was overtly commercial and, had the whole like entertainer thing and was dancing and doing all this stuff that was antithetical to what hip hop really was at that point. Um, Had he come around 5 years later, he probably would have had a longer career.
Yeah,
because all of that,
he probably looked at Puff Daddy and was like, "Come
yeah,
on, bro."
at Puffy, at Jay, at Will Smith, like all these people who kind of took his blueprint a little bit and just like ran far and long with it. But also, Hammer's not in jail, so
Sure. Yeah, he's not.
yeah,
Um, the aspect so and this is an album that we will talk about at some point, but my origin story of becoming a fan of hip hop very much has to do with like this idea of like, oh, so even though I like You Can't Touch Us and I like MC Hammer, there is the majority of the culture that he is in does not agree with that style. And then you hear Q-Tip said, rap is not pop. And I was like, whoa. So I really like A Tribe Called Quest, and they don't like Hammer. And that was like, man, what? So now I have to sort of figure out what this is. Like, what is the difference? Like, why don't they like Hammer? Is it because of the Rick James sample? Is it because he's, he, and then as you learn more about the art form, he's like, okay, like, yeah, he's not the greatest rapper in any way. So yeah, there's just a lot of things that as you learn about these cultures, and I think that's what makes hip hop unique. And also, again, going back to Selena, what makes crossing over, which is what she was trying to do, to go from the Tejano Spanish speaking, Spanish singing audience to the US as she passed. And I do wonder, would she have been accepted had she not passed away? Would that English album have been kind of, I guess you think about Shakira coming several years later, like Shakira becomes a giant pop star on a crossover album. Would Selena have been able to do that? She didn't have the same act as Selena as Shakira,
right.
um, but she was younger and she was in tune with uh Ralph Tresvant, and she utilized her youthfulness to kind of introduce like, hey, I may do Tejano music, but I also know how to do this stuff. I also really appreciate this stuff that is really cool with American culture.
Right. I mean, it was still another 3 or 4 years after, Selena passed away that there was the, quote unquote Latin explosion where like Ricky and J Lo and Big Pun and, all of these artists kind of came out like 98, 99, 2000, whatever. And I mean, when you pass away, and particularly when you pass away tragically, like the cult of personality around you grows so much. Like it's kind of hard to say how successful or how long someone would have been successful if they had lived. I mean, certainly in terms of the Latin community, Selena was very much a rising star. Like, I don't know necessarily that she'd hit her peak there, but I don't necessarily also know that the crossover would have been as impactful had it not been for her passing.
Yeah, that is the age old question, hypothesis, theory that we always think about when artists pass away young.
Right.
How what would their careers have been like? Like, I mean, you think of James Dean, right? Like everyone was compared to James Dean if you were young, Caucasian, and cool. Like, oh, that's the next James
James
Dean.
Dean. Yeah.
And who knows what James Dean would have been like if he actually got to 50 years old? Would he still have been an actor or whatever? So it's always like the thing that the what if of this stuff. So all right, this was cool. I'm glad we got to talk about Selena. I'm glad that documentary is out there. Suzette, the sister, she had mentioned that something that I thought was really interesting, and we'll end with this. Everyone remembers the Selena movie with Jennifer Lopez in it. Suzette said that the reason they made that movie, or they agreed to the movie, is because the movie company said, we're putting this thing out with you or without you. So if you want this thing to have your voice in it, like you should come work with us and on this. And she, like, can you imagine, like, your little sister passes away, and then immediately the business of entertainment is like, Now we're going to make a movie to monetize your sister's death. So come on board, unless, if you want us to make something that has your experience in it.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer or a legal expert. I feel like if the idea of a movie came across and a big studio was behind it and they didn't get permission from the estate, there would be some kind of like legal liability there.
Maybe all they have to do is call it unauthorized.
Right. But then it wouldn't have been anywhere near as successful.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, of course, there is the opportunity for them to also make some money off of it. I'm assuming as well from the estate.
Right.
All right, man. This is it for our first cool check-in here. We'll have a few more of these. A bunch more of these over the series, over the 50 for 50. Hope everyone's enjoying it. Of course, 50for50.net. The website is up and stuff is on it, and it's also where you're going to be able to read Mike's writing on the reviews of the albums that we talk about. And we've talked about putting playlists and stuff up there, and we'll get that going and figure that out. But that is going to be your place to make sure that you can see and hear all of our stuff, all the YouTube videos. And if you don't like YouTube, all the audio of these videos is up there as well. All right, Mike. That is it from here. So for Mike, I am Double G. See you when we see you. Peace out.